Creep was an interesting movie for fans of found footage and mockumentaries, because it's basically both in one. A strong, hilarious horror film that's both creep-inducing and hilarious. There's also a TV show now on Shudder that's been out for a couple years, and it's just as strong as the movies. Now, Creep 2 is a kick-ass sequel that raises the stakes, flips the premise on its head, and adds brand new elements to elevate the franchise, as all good sequels need to do. Creep 2 succeeds as a found footage film, much like the first film did, but also as a horror/suspense comedy. It rises above its found footage classifications, making good use of the device, but also making you forget that you're watching a film with a gimmick. The performances here are amazing. The improvisational quality of the banter between the two leads comes off naturalistic as hell. The humor hits even harder than the first film, believe it or not, and the creep factor goes into hyperdrive and never lets go. I look so forward to the next installment of this unique horror series, or the next season of the TV show, whatever they want to give me. I'm down. I can't speak for anyone else, but I knew basically nothing going into this film, and because of that was completely taken by surprise by its well-hidden twist. I didn't find it predictable in the slightest, as a lot of people claim. The film has a bit of that natural-born killers vibe, in that its main characters are wanted crazy people, two of which play like Mickey and Mallory clones, who go on a bit of a crime spree after escaping from the loony bin. It is definitely one of the most unique Chainsaw installments. It doesn't include young people being stalked by the Sawyer family much at all. And there's not even a lunatics at the dinner table scene. No grandpa, no corrupt local who is revealed to be in bed with the Sawyers, just crazy criminals and the open road. Stephen Dorff gives a powerful performance as the local sheriff out for revenge. Kind of reminded me of William Forsythe's character in Rob Zombie's The Devil's Rejects. And Lily Taylor is also strong as Mama Sawyer. She's not in it much, but her presence alone provides serious credentials for this film. I am personally a fan of the entire Chainsaw series. I consider most of the entries in the film to be either anthology-based, meaning not necessarily sequels, with the exception of the second film, of course. I actually like how the family members keep changing from film to film, kind of like that ongoing National Lampoon's Vacation joke with the recasting of the Griswold kids. Continuity was never really the point anyway. The point is the Saw, and as we all know, the Saw is family. Now what we got here is a fun exercise for you. Two films based on the same exact subject matter that were made in different decades, 9 years separating the two. First, The Awakening from 1980, based on Bram Stoker's written work, yes, that Bram Stoker, The Jewel of Seven Stars. The Awakening is actually one of 5 feature film adaptations of this specific work. 5 times they adapted this into another form of media. This one may be the strongest of the bunch, having Charlton Heston in its cast and being an early credit in director Mike Newell's career. The effects are gruesomely effective, and the atmosphere is decently creepy. That's what I got to say about that one. Now let's move on to Blood from the Mummy's Tomb from 1971. This is a Hammer film, another one of the many adaptations from The Jewel of Seven Stars. Blood from the Mummy's Tomb is given the British Hammer-style treatment. It is more gratuitous than The Awakening, featuring more nudity and violence, as was custom for British horror films of the 1970s. The film also holds more of a dreamlike quality than the other adaptations. Because of this, the film manages to have its own unique identity, but its incoherent plot structure manages to be its weakness as well as its strength. I challenge you people to watch both of these movies. It's a very interesting exercise in adaptation. It is the same story, but done from completely different artistic perspectives and styles. The Dark Half is another Stephen King and George Romero team-up of sorts. This time, Romero aims to bring one of King's novels to the screen. It's the classic Jekyll and Hyde story, but with a supernatural/sci-fi twist. The effects are gruesome and memorable. The film starts with the shot of a moving eyeball inside of someone's brain. Then a bunch of birds show up and say hi. It's actually one of the strongest and most eerie horror film openings I've ever seen. Timothy Hutton is great in dual roles, the darker of the two halves being a southern psychopath with a straight razor as his favorite toy. The film is mostly psychological but turns straight up slasher by the halfway point. There is no skimping on the gore here, especially during the film's gruesomely wacko climax. This is another interesting turn for the Leprechaun franchise. After his inevitable trip to space went so well, they're no longer walking the line between serious horror and satire here. The little devil we love to love goes head to head with Ice-T and the hip-hop industry. Needless to say, ridiculous fun occurs throughout. There is even a rap music video sequence starring the Leprechaun himself. It is a one-joke film, that joke being the fish-out-of-water craziness of a tiny Irish ghoul mingling with African-American street-savvy gangsters and rappers. The original hip-hop tracks are a highlight of the film, as are the performances by the cast, especially by Mr. T himself. The film is part slasher, part blaxploitation, and part musical. Unfortunately, it doesn't all work and certain elements are stronger than others, but it works enough for what it is to stay amusing. Demon Seed is a disturbing Fatal Attraction-style thriller involving a smart house and the wife of the man who created it. I had first become aware of the story when it appeared as a Treehouse of Horror segment on The Simpsons, where Pierce Brosnan played the voice of the creepy robot. So of course, I just had to check out the source material for myself. In the film, just as on The Simpsons, the artificial intelligence becomes infatuated with the creator's wife, played well by Julie Christie. It is convinced that it must procreate with her, creating the ultimate being of human and machine. He believes it is the next evolutionary step of our species. This movie is pretty far out there with its plot and imagery, so just that alone might not be for everybody. But with our current climate of AI invading our world, our lives, our jobs, and such, perhaps this movie hosts a metaphor that is all too close for comfort. Night Watch is a Rear Window homage starring Elizabeth Taylor as an emotionally disturbed woman who is convinced she has witnessed a murder. This is Night Watch from 1973, by the way. There are a lot of Night Watches, so you gotta be careful if you're searching this one out. The film is full of Hitchcockian suspense and paranoia. Taylor gives a sympathetic performance as the poor woman with a sick head who has run low on trustworthy confidants. Not even the police believe her, and she becomes a groan-worthy joke to all those around her. But could there possibly be a validity to her fears? Could she be the next on the murderer's kill list? All will be revealed in this psychological shocker from the 1970s. Village of the Damned is a creepy little black and white horror flick from the 1960s that is loaded with intrigue and spooky eye-glowing British children. They possess the power to control human minds, convincing them into brutal acts of self-harm. I first saw the John Carpenter remake theatrically in the mid-90s. This was long before I finally got around to seeing the original. I even saw The Simpsons parody the film before I had a tangible reference of my own. I do have a fondness in my heart for the remake, but the greatness of this original adaptation of The Midwich Cuckoos cannot be denied. The creep factor is even more intense when portrayed in black and white, and the film has a 1960s sheen to it. Much like the Carpenter film feels very much like a 90s film. I also enjoy the ambiguity of this version in dealing with the origin of the evil children, where the 90s version kind of spells it out, making it clearly obvious that they are of alien descent. The original is more secretive, letting you wonder if they could be born of hell or something even more sinister. So I say check this one out if you got a chance. Or even better, watch them both back to back. That's what I would do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A rip-roaringly exciting score by Christopher Young fuels this remake of a 1950s sci-fi classic. The film is filled with dark, tongue-in-cheek humor, the zombified parent action is especially hilarious, social paranoia, and chillingly kooky creature effects by the great Stan Winston himself. Actress Karen Black's screaming face is definitely something to see. She looks like she's on the verge of crossed eyes with every horrified shriek she gives. Overall, this 1980s Tobe Hooper-directed creature feature is perfect cheesy goodness. The film is underappreciated for its twisted, cheesy comedy, much like Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, another classic genre satire. Invaders from Mars captures the heart of the original as well as its own decade nicely. In addition to the laughs, there are quite a few memorable scares scattered throughout. For instance, the needle drill through the back of the neck scene is still squirmingly effective. We accept her, one of us, Gooble Gobble, Gooble Gobble. Being a fan of the Basket Case films and being familiar with the freak show season of American Horror Story, it was a treat to finally see this banned Todd Browning classic. He wisely chose real circus performers over traditional actors, and it brings an authentic charm to the film. The plot is a scandalous one. The small man in a freak show has a wandering eye, and his tiny wife knows it. But the tall woman, Cleopatra, the object of his affection, plans to play him for a fool. She laughs at him behind his back, all the while blowing kisses to his face. But in the end, it just might lead to her undoing. So much drama going on at the circus. The freaks in the film are treated like regular people, treated with respect. You can tell that Browning loved these characters. These are real people. Side note, I wonder if the Stuttering Man character was the inspiration for Porky Pig. Just a thought. An effective throwback to the 1980s slasher craze, My Bloody Valentine breathes new life into the Canadian slasher of the same name. Although many liberties are taken with the story and characters, the film manages to please both casual horror fans as well as hardcore devotees of the original. The film's 3D gimmick shines in the best way, taking full advantage by throwing pickaxes and bloody gore at the camera lands. There is no holding back here. The filmmakers delight in the gratuitous glee occurring on screen. The cast is serviceable for the material. A highlight was the casting of genre veteran Tom Atkins of Night of the Creeps and Halloween 3's Season of the Witch fame. Maximum Overdrive is the infamous Exhibit A that corroborates Stephen King's 1980s cocaine addiction. He makes his directorial debut, as well as his directorial swan song, all in one drug-addled swoop. The plot is a pretty simple one. A comet passes over Earth, causing all man-made machines to become sentient. And they're real bastards, too. This leads to a group of strangers seeking refuge in a diner a la George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. So there's your movie. And it's beautifully nutso. The soundtrack is kick-ass, unless you hate AC/DC, that is. The cast is a hoot to hang out with, unless you despise Emilio Estevez or Lisa Simpson. Even if you hate AC/DC, there is a contribution that they make to the score that anyone can appreciate. They create a Bernard Herrmann's Psycho shower scene inspired theme that plays throughout the film, swapping out the violins for electric guitars, of course. Those guitars start singing whenever the killer contraptions are about to strike. Spider-Man's arch nemesis, Green Goblin, shows up in truck form pretty early on and serves as the film's primary antagonist. I guess the main villain of any story should have a distinct face. And what better face to have than a familiar one? I have to say, even with his kooky ways, Maximum Overdrive is required viewing for anyone who calls themselves a fan of King or of 1980s horror schlock. Cooties is a horror comedy with its heart in the right place. It has a clever script and an ensemble cast that is to die for. Elijah Wood produces and stars, continuing his journey through the world of genre cinema, with this film penned by Saw creator Lee Whannell, who also co-stars, by the way. Cooties is a horror comedy made by fans of horror movies. There are constant winks at the camera and moments of absolute gory glee. The humor hits when it needs to, and the suspense is palpable. The opening to the film works nicely as an anti-meat advertisement, especially poultry. I wouldn't eat anything chicken-based during this flick if I were you. I Am Not a Serial Killer is an excellent indie horror in the vein of the Dexter TV series, but with an unexpected genre twist. The lead actor, Max Records, is absolutely fantastic as the teenager with pre-serial killer traits. His name is John Wayne Cleaver. And I don't know what's funnier, a future serial killer named after a famous cowboy or a serial killer with the last name Cleaver. He works with his family preparing bodies for funerals. This helps to quench his twisted urge for human-on-human carnage. His interest is piqued when a series of murders begins to occur in the area. This launches the main narrative of this darkly funny yet dramatic genre gem. Veteran character actor Christopher Lloyd appears as the young man's curiously gentle neighbor. He gives an equally fantastic performance. Watch as two people are unbearably cruel to a poor, innocent cat lady. Not in the way that she owns lots of cats, but in the way that she herself is a cat person. She is awkward and naive to the ways of man. How reckless and cruel they can be. This is definitely a complex film. No clear antagonist or protagonist roles, but I'm fairly sure that we are meant to sympathize with the cat lady's husband and his future mistress. He falls for a partner of his at work, one that he had been unknowingly harboring feelings for quite some time. His love with his mistress is spun as a fairy tale romance, and that their deception should be forgiven because it's true love written in the stars, and all that nonsense. But all I see is a poor mentally ill wife and a selfish husband. Not to mention his partner, who tries hard to win the trust and favor of the wife before inevitably stabbing her in the back. Make no mistake, these are awful people. And I'd take the side of the cat person over those two hooligans any day. The film is shot beautifully. Its scenes of horror and suspense are pulled off effortlessly by the use of shadows and sound design. The film is well performed and hosts an eerie, noir-like atmosphere. One of the best things about The Curse of the Cat People is that you finally get to see those awful cheaters from the first film get their comeuppance. Unfortunately, their love child is caught in the crosshairs. Their innocent daughter starts receiving visits from an imaginary friend. Of course, no one can actually see her imaginary friend, but she bears a striking resemblance to the cat lady from the first film. This sequel feels different in style and tone from the first. It is less noir and more dark fairy tale. Instead of being based in a city, it has a country setting. Overall, it is an interesting little sequel. There is even an old inclusion of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. We are told and reminded of the legend a few times throughout the course of the film, but the Headless Horseman never shows up, unfortunately. The legend itself bears absolutely no weight on the plot of the film whatsoever. It really is a bizarre addition to the script, to tell you the truth. The entire film is even set in the town of Sleepy Hollow. Perhaps so that the filmmakers would have an excuse to include the Washington Irving tale. You don't need fangs to be a monster. A sequel with real bite and more of a focused narrative, this film has 3 lurking threats this time around: the different classes of vamps, the religious cult followers, and the cannibalistic humans. This makes for a much richer and scarier post-apocalyptic world. It's darker, more dangerous, and blooming with chaos. In these ways, I would say that Stakeland 2, or The Stakelander, is superior to the original. It also has an increased number of action set pieces. They feel bigger and more elaborately realized. The vampire effects are effectively grotesque, the characters look cooler, and the performances are great. Nick D'Amici is always a treat. You better not be lying, boy, 'cause I'm in a dick-shooting mood today. Stakeland 2 is an action revenge story with an old-school Western feel. Like the first one, it's also a post-apocalyptic road movie. I'd say overall this movie is not too shabby for a film about vampires and cannibals. This is one of the better Blumhouse efforts. Viral is a claustrophobic parasitic worm fest with a unique take on the zombie subgenre. The script is well written, featuring believable characters, tense set pieces, and loads of paranoia. The cast performs well together, creating naturalistic scenes of dialogue. There is real emotion felt between them, so when one of them perishes, it hits hard. At its core, Viral is the story of 2 sisters, and the arc between them evolves nicely throughout the film. There are some truly terrifying scenes and creepy imagery, worms protruding out of a zombie's ears like antennae, for instance. The film was impressively pulled off on what must have been a super low budget, knowing the Blumhouse business model and all. World War Z is a zombie action hybrid with a geographical scope much bigger than any other zombie film before it. Spanning multiple countries, World War Z gives a first-hand look at what a worldwide zombie pandemic might look like. It is essentially a road movie / travelogue with zombies. The action set pieces are exquisitely executed. They leave you oozing with dread and nail-biting suspense. It's jam-packed with a summer blockbuster / popcorn-grabbing style of excitement and dramatic performances that are impeccably delivered with integrity. This is one of the only 3 horror films that Brad Pitt has starred in, not since 1994's Interview with a Vampire. His presence brings respectability to a subgenre that's been long overdue. Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse is an early film from writer-director Christopher Landon of Happy Death Day and Paranormal Activity fame. This is actually the first movie that he did outside of the Paranormal Activity franchise, with the exception of his non-horror directorial debut, that is. The film is a darkly comedic coming-of-age story with zombies. It has the raunchy spirit of a Judd Apatow film and the gory glee of Sam Raimi and early Peter Jackson. They throw a few bits of originality at the zombie subgenre in Scouts. There is an entire cat lady's house full of zombie kitties, as well as zombie selfies to behold. The Boy Scout concept is also a fresh one, and serves as a good device for the coming-of-age aspect of the story. A good portion of the film may seem familiar, especially the John Hughesiness of it all, but the filmmakers bring enough freshness to sustain the quality of this entertaining zombie comedy. Peter Lorre gives one of the creepiest, most sadistic portrayals of a depraved psychopath ever, and in his American film debut, no less. In this atmospheric psychological horror classic, Mad Love is full of dark humor and memorable performances by Lorre himself, as well as Francis Drake and Frankenstein's Colin Clive. The creepy imagery of Laurie's romantic obsession with his favorite starlet goes too far when he purchases her wax sculpture, a perfect doppelganger of her likeness, and truly one of the most accurate wax creations ever sculpted. His obsession reaches maniacal heights when he devises a plan to frame her husband for murder, and pin it on his newly transplanted hands, the very hands that he surgically transplanted himself. The plot of Mad Love is preposterous to say the least, but it is in the most amazing way possible. A ludicrous good time, I must say. And a must-see for fans of weirdo cinema and the fabulous Peter Lorre. Here Alone is another paranoia-fueled post-apocalyptic zombie/viral tale about humanity's struggle for survival. The characters in this film are forced to adapt to unbearable loss, loneliness, isolation, and the volatile new world that surrounds them. Is it safe to hope for the future, or is that just a temptation that will inevitably lead to your demise? One thing is for sure, it is tiring work to have to continuously keep one's guard up. I love the stillness that this film displays. The relaxed pace of it all helps to set a suspenseful yet depressing tone that is perfect for the story. When it hits, the horror is extremely effective. The performances here are great. The filmmakers achieve more depth and character development in 90 minutes than The Walking Dead did in 7 seasons. Here Alone is a refreshing slice of indie horror. Blair Witch fits in nicely with the other 2 films in the franchise. The world hadn't heard from this series in over 15 years when the news hit of its planned revival. The advertising team had initially lied about the film's title, saying it was just another run-of-the-mill horror flick called The Woods. That is until a special screening at a film festival dramatically let that cat out of the bag. The truth is, I think that they waited far too long to make a new Blair Witch sequel. The found footage genre had already grown tired and was quite frankly on the verge of death upon this film's release, and not even the original gangster herself could save its sluggish pulse. It's a real shame though, because Blair Witch is both an effective found footage film as well as a worthy sequel. Director Adam Wingard had previous success in the horror genre with his critical hits You're Next and The Guest. I also quite enjoyed his debut feature, Homesick. I caught it on DVD back in 2007. He hasn't explored the found footage genre before Blair Witch, but he proves to handle it nicely. There are a few items that help to update this new installment, bringing it out of the Stone Age, so to speak. Such items include a noisy drone camera, HD quality footage, and a modern internet experience. There is also much less shaky cam, which is always a good thing. We revisit the iconic house from the first film in the climax. The scene is extremely creepy and disorienting. It winds up properly doing the Blair Witch Project justice. There is as much character development here as in the other films, and the characters may seem familiar as they tend to show up in every single found footage film ever released. My favorite of the series is still Book of Shadows. Trust me, I know how controversial that statement is, but Blair Witch is far from a waste of time and a must-see for fans of the series or the found footage subgenre. Of unknown origin. Some creepily grotesque macro shots of actual rats and miniature sets give this nail-biter from the 1980s its unique identity. It lacks the conventional humor of something like Mouse Hunt from the 1990s, although the final act is quite hilarious in its own way. But there's nothing sweet or redeemable about this particular rodent. Nothing cutesy-wootsy, where everyone's living together in peace and harmony by the end. No. She, the rat is a female, means to upset the life and mind of Peter Weller, giving another top-notch Peter Wellian performance, by the way, driving him to the brink of madness until all he holds is vanquished forever. He becomes obsessed with the rodent. His priorities shift drastically once he is informed of what it will take for him to win the battle. He will need to give himself completely to the cause, for she is a worthy opponent and wants nothing more than for him to suffer. But then again, this is war, and isn't war meant to appear and feel like hell? All I know is all bets were surely off once he messed with her babies. Such scenes as a giant rat crawling under covers, someone's barefoot stroll through a house full of rat traps, and a bowl of milky rat poison surprise, just to name a few, make this the suspenseful treat of horror that it is. The size of the rat curiously seems to be going up and down in size quite often. This may be a flaw in the forced perspective, but I like to think that it's Peter Weller's mind that does it. In his head, the rat would of course appear larger to symbolize the damage it has caused/threat that it poses. Chuck's back, and this time he's checked himself, along with a few familiar faces, into the loony bin. After the classic haunted house tone that Curse of Chucky brought, Don Mancini changes it up yet again, bringing back a bit of that Chucky charm, complete with quippy one-liners and gruesome dark humor. Fiona Dourif also returns and is brilliant as always. Only this time there are even more layers and dimensions to her character. Easter eggs and nods to the entire Child's Play franchise are plentiful and scattered throughout the film. It plays like a tribute for the fans, but also serves as a strong sequel and natural evolution of the overarching story. The film ends leaving the viewer wanting more, excited to see where these new developments will take the series in the next installment. Of course, as we all know, the next installment would be a TV series that would last 3 seasons and then be canceled, but it was fun while it lasted. Blood and Black Lace. We start this Giallo classic with a kick-ass opening credit sequence that plays out in roll call fashion. Each member of the cast poses with red mannequins and ultra-colorful Mario Bava lighting. And the colors don't stop there. They strobe in and out, creating eerie atmosphere and fantastic dread. Like in Bava's Drop of Water segment from Black Sabbath, they appear in harsh reds, the mannequins, out-of-place greens and blues, and gothic purples. As always in Bava's films, the set decorations are absolutely gorgeous. The music is super 60s slick, adding mood and flavor to the mystery as it unravels. Blood and Black Lace is not Bava's worst, but it's no Bay of Blood either. It exists somewhere in the middle, really. But that's perfectly okay because Mario Bava will always remain a brilliant and trend-setting voice in Italian horror cinema. "Your mother's a loony, ain't she?" asks George Kennedy. The opening is crazy good. It is told through voiceover narration and features madcap axe-murdering goodness. The overall film is gloriously over-the-top and campy, mostly thanks to Joan Crawford's strong, tortured, and borderline hilarious performance. After she murders her husband and lover in front of their daughter, her mind is left broken, frozen in time since that fateful night that she committed the crime. And now it's time for her to be released from the loony bin and stay with her surviving daughter. But is she cured of her madness? Straight Jacket was produced and directed by William Castle, and it is absolutely drenched in his style. It was written by Robert Bloch of Psycho fame. It is quite brilliantly constructed and has a bit of a psycho twist to it involving a wig and a dress that Norman Bates would have loved. Everyone's a stranger, says Joan Crawford in the film. This only adds to the paranoia that the film exudes. Who is left to be trusted when those closest to you have already betrayed you? And what can this potentially do to your mind? This is the main theme of the piece. Before long, the film turns slasher with the body count rising one head at a time. There are several eerie dream sequences in the film. They depict her ongoing descent into madness in horrifically inventive ways. Straight Jacket kind of plays like a darker, more dramatic version of the John Waters film Serial Mom. Be sure to watch the film in its entirety. You won't be sorry. Also, don't forget to keep a lookout for the Columbia logo at the very end. It just may be missing a head. Grabbers. The score is spot-on perfect, at times enchanting and fantastical, while at other times suspenseful and exciting, but always feeling lavish, important, and organically defined. The Ireland backdrop only complements the film. The scenery is gorgeous, giving it a cozy oceanside town feel. This type of setting always works wonders for indie horror. The script has the perfect level of humor to fit the film, not too silly, not too dry, and closer to An American Werewolf in London in tone. It takes its scares and characters seriously, The creature design is inventive. They ease you into the reveal nicely without suffering in the suspense/terror category. They know how to pull off less is more with superb precision. They could have even gotten away with waiting a little longer, to tell you the truth. And then, when the time finally comes, right at the tail end of the first act, the special effects do not disappoint. The performances are all well done and given by a batch of fresh faces. Such casting choices are always refreshing to see and impact the story in a positive way. The one exception being Russell Tovey from the BBC show Being Human. I don't know if it's a straight-up Irish joke, it most certainly is, or not, but the answer to the protagonist's problems in this film is booze. If we taint our blood with booze, we're poisonous to eat, says one of the lead characters. It gives a unique meaning to the phrase, drinking on the job. Throw an alcoholic cop, a town full of boozing fishermen, and a species of moisture-loving sea creatures onto a lush Irish landscape, and what do you get? A clever idea indeed. You must die. Die, my darling. Written by the great Richard Matheson, an adapted screenplay, Die, Die, My Darling, aka Fanatic, as it is known in the UK, is a British horror gem from Hammer Films with a dry, sinister wit. The madness begins when a woman decides to visit her dead ex-fiance's crazy mother. That mistake leads her to be held against her will and forced to repent her sins. The crazy mother holds a gun in one hand and a Bible in the other. Strong imagery indeed. She is played by classic actress Tallulah Bankhead. Her performance is absolutely the strongest part of the entire film. Her voice is husky and menacious. She sounds like an evil witch in a fairy tale at times. It's absolutely fantastic, although it is on account of her unique voice that she is a bit difficult to understand at times. Donald Sutherland appears in an interesting and rather unusual for him role as an intimidating simpleton. He is surprisingly perfect. The scene with Sutherland and the top-secret postcard is hilarious. Die, Die, My Darling is darkly funny at times and nail-bitingly tense at others. It's Stephen King's Misery meets Carrie meets Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The corpse makeup used in this film is reminiscent of the zombie makeup used in George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. The look of the film is very well executed. It's very well shot, and Crazy Mum's house is the perfect eerie setting. I mean, you just gotta love that weirdo purple, green, and blue lighting setup that she has in the basement, although I believe it's just the sun cast through stained glass windows. I was also quite fond of the ending, and it's capped off with a great final line. Why don't you shut up? We're going home. The film also inspired a kick-ass Misfits song of the same name many years later, which was then later covered by Metallica on their Garage Inc. album. In conclusion, I believe we can all agree that late-night comfort cheese can cool even the hottest temper. The film is misleading in that it actually takes place over several nights. Nights of the Lepus would have been a much more accurate title, but it does contain many, many Lepus, so that part is accurate. If you love bunnies, or Lepus, or even Lepusing bunnies, you will love this Raging Lepus Fest. The special effects are bold and hilarious. This movie is so much fun, it's almost unbearable at times. Such joy can be overwhelming for the joy receiver. The stalk and slash scenes are the best, although they are all very similar. Usually a giant bunny will be lurking outside a helpless victim's window or something, like Jason Voorhees, only to finally crash through said window and maul said victim like a cuddly teddy bear with razor claws. This is pulled off with an actor in a suit, of course, and then comes the glorious 1970s Hammer-style blood, although there never seems to be any wound involved. So long story short, the Lepus mean business. They tear, rip, and dismember their way through a whole lot of folks. Mess 'em up real good, they do. Lepus is a truly mesmerizing film experience. Really something special, and I must mention what a trippy experience it was for me to go from watching Janet Leigh in Touch of Evil to Janet Leigh in Night of the Lepus. What an impressively varied career she had. In conclusion, Night of the Lepus gives the term B-movie a whole new meaning. Director Renny Harlin officially brings the Nightmare franchise into the MTV generation by upping the pop/rock song quotient and relying on a fresh, kinetic editing style. Harlin was nothing more than a homeless up-and-comer at the time, but would go on to direct an eclectic list of action films from the tremendously successful Cliffhanger to the infamously over-budgeted flop Cutthroat Island. He was also married to actress Gina Davis for a few years. She was a frequent collaborator of his, including the Shane Black scripted The Long Kiss Goodnight with Samuel L. Jackson. This film picks up where the third installment, Dream Warriors, leaves off, with the three of the original characters returning. Actor-wise, they were able to get everybody back except for Patricia Arquette, who declined the producer's offer to return. I believe that this is what inspired their decision to kill off her character and replace her with a new heroine named Alice. Alice's story would continue in Part 5. This decision also mirrors the Janet Leigh-inspired demise of Tina in the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. The Dream Master features some of the most impressive practical effects in the series, most of which were made up on the fly. There is a particularly memorable Roach Motel sequence that was handled by weirdo effects genius Screaming Mad George. I have to say there is some jarring ADR in Part 4 and 5 of this series. It's either due to poor sound control on the set or a stylistic choice. I did notice that some of the scenes were obviously shot with long lenses, but I can't really be sure why so many of the actors' dialogue was replaced in post. Depending on your opinion, you will either see this effect as subpar or amateurish, or aesthetically pleasing given the dreamlike nature of the plot of each film. A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. You can think of this installment as the pro-life nightmare. Screenwriter Leslie Boehm certainly doesn't hide her views on the topic. The plot involves Freddy Krueger invading the dreams of an unborn fetus as a way to possess and manipulate his way back into existence. You know, as you do. This leads to scenes where our pregnant heroine Alice has conversations with the physical manifestation of her unborn son. His name is Jacob. We are to assume that his name was always Jacob, since she had yet to pick a name for her baby prior to meeting him. Her unborn fetus is portrayed as a fully drawn character with thoughts, fears, and motivations. Not too subtle in my opinion. Boehm even injects a bit of factual info into her script that I was previously unaware of. It involves the dream habits of unborn fetuses. Apparently, scientists have found that the fetus spends most of its time in a dream state, making this the perfect premise for an Elm Street flick. Although the film does leave out the specifics of this not occurring until the 7th month, and we are never quite clear what trimester Alice is in during the course of the film. As always, there are some pretty inventive nightmare sequences on display featuring state-of-the-art practical effects. Dream Child actually features my favorite nightmare of the entire series, where one of Alice's friends, Greta, eats herself to death. This is all carried out by Freddy's hand, of course. It's Greta's bulimia personified in classic nightmare form. The entire sequence from Greta being force-fed to an entire table of her abusive mother's friends laughing belligerently at her suffering is extremely effective, especially for those who can relate to such illnesses. Stephen Hopkins was a proper visual fit for the series. Freddy is in full-on ham mode here. The excessiveness of his cartoonish demeanor and gratuitous one-liners had been on the incline since Dream Warriors. At the end of the film, you might notice that the film's elaborate M.C. Escher display was most certainly lifted from the climax of Jim Henson's 1986 film Labyrinth. A side-by-side comparison of the two would prove this accusation undeniable. This is definitely the first pure comedy of the Nightmare series. It's a dark cartoon, really. Unsurprisingly, it is also the first film directed by John Waters' collaborator, Rachel Talalay, who had been working behind the scenes on the Nightmare films for almost a decade. Freddy's Gone has a kooky energy that Talalay would bring into her 1995 feature, Tank Girl. The film also has a solid early 90s rock soundtrack. Motion picture soundtracks were of peak importance in the 90s. They even got Alice Cooper to cameo in the film. While Alice Cooper never recorded a song for the Nightmare on Elm Street films, he did do a song for Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, which practically makes him part of the family. The acting is improved upon from the previous entries. This is achieved by making sure that the dialogue is synced up properly. No more unnecessary ADR here, and that the performances are delivered in a much more naturalistic style, for the most part anyway. Leslie Dean's character plays like a reject from parts 3 through 5. Her tough girl persona is overly manufactured and laughable at times. Freddy must have went to clown college somewhere between part 5 and this movie, because he gives off major bozo energy here. Perhaps they could have called the film Big Top Freddy instead. This would have definitely been more appropriate, since Freddy never really stays gone, does he? But then again, as they say, don't hate the player, hate the game. Wes Craven's New Nightmare was an early example of cinematic meta existing in the horror landscape. It was also as good an excuse as any for Wes Craven to get together with his buddies and play exaggerated versions of themselves. This was Craven's return to the genre, a borderline apologetic comeback, seeking amends for his allowing of the Nightmare franchise to sink as low as it did. And also an apology for his allegiance to Meryl Streep and his vow to never touch horror again. Like the best of Wes Craven's writer-director efforts, New Nightmare is an intellectual film full of ambitious ideas rooted in a mix of truth and anecdotal science. You can tell that the cast is getting a kick out of playing dual roles and examining their industry personas in a satirical manner. But perhaps the film could have gone even further in taking the piss out of Hollywood. Unfortunately, we would have to wait until 2000's Scream 3 for Wes to tackle that whale of a subject. The film aims to be creepier and scarier than its predecessors, and on this front, it basically is successful. Although, this incarnation does suffer from being one of Craven's least rewatchable films. Perhaps an effect of its more dour tone and dark subject matter. Or, the fact that it was never trying to be a fun romp. Besides, that's what we have Scream for. Ronnie Yu attempts to reconjure that wacky Bride of Chucky magic while bringing much-needed closure to the age-old question, who would win in a fight between X and Y movie maniacs, though? The playing field is often uneven in these types of films, given the writer's tendency to make one of them the less bad guy. Said role would be filled by Jason in this film, and the Predator in Alien vs. Predator. Freddy vs. Jason is more of an Elm Street film than the Friday the 13th film, so right off the bat, Jason is treated like a bit of a chump. Not to mention the fact that they cast an actor equal to Robert Englund's height, so it wouldn't look awkward when the two foes were standing in the same shot together. This is very silly thinking, and it cost Kane Hodder a great job with a hefty paycheck. The best thing about the film is that it exists. Even though the form which it exists may be flawed, the fans still got something. And yeah, it may not have Ash Williams and Freddy's makeup may be super weak sauce, but something is better than nothing. It is, however, a shame that this film wasn't the epic horror masterpiece that every horror fan was yearning for. But one thing's for sure, Fred vs. JJ does exist as a final goodbye to a bygone era, an extremely 2003 ode to the 1980s slasher craze. Not the deep cuts or the grimy film trash, but the mainstream horror which spawned multiple kick-ass metal songs, subpar TV shows, and a surplus of killer merchandise.